Hello, welcome back to the Caleb Landis Show. Programming note, as we begin next Tuesday, we will not have our regularly scheduled episode. I will be at the Crawford County Fair, which is kind of the big event on the early vote action calendar here in this area of the country. And I'm just going to be not willing to miss that much time at the booth at the Crawford County Fair. However, I am not going to be just abandoning you either for the week. So what I am planning on doing is having sort of a special episode from the fair. It's going to be much shorter. And it's not going to be in a podcast format per se. We're not moving the equipment. We're not setting up the studio, but we're going to be recording some footage from there. So next week, the Caleb Landis Show will not be on Tuesday. It will likely be over the weekend, probably Friday and Saturday. Evenings would be my guess. We'll see how it works out once I'm there. But I'm not going to just leave you high and dry. We just won't have a regular episode on Tuesday. So watch out for the special edition, the shortened edition of the Caleb Landis Show from the Crawford County Fair next week instead of Tuesday, over the weekend. Also, I have another tease for you. I mentioned it last week. Some projects that we have going on to grow the brand. I think you're going to enjoy it greatly. I was hoping it would be ready by this week's episode. It is not. However, it is getting closer, and the added time that before launch means that the surprise itself will be a little bit bigger when we actually launch. So looking forward to that. Keep your ears peeled for that. We have a couple of important news items for you today, more than usual. Today's format's going to be a little bit different, a little bit more rapid fire, because there are a lot of important facts that I want to hit you with before our time this week is done. Remember, that's what we do here. My job on this show is to gather and introduce to you bits of news, bits of reality, facts that I feel are not being appropriately addressed in the news media at large. That is what you should come here and expect. Now, the information that I find, the reality checks that I find, the little facts that I drop in, the things that we talk about here in the show, they are not exclusive to me in any way. What I am doing, what my show prep looks like, is a lot of social media and a lot of AI. I use Grok a ton to collect further information about news headlines, news items that I see, usually or many times off of X, and I find them in other places as well. But my point is that you can do this too. You may not have the time or the interest in doing that. That's fine. That's why my show is here, right? But you don't have to take my word for anything that I say. Any of the facts, any of the information, any of the news that I find, you can find yourself as well to verify that I am not blowing smoke. So let's jump into our first news item of the day. Today, it is the woman who defaced the World War II memorial. Normally, I would say allegedly. Of course, she will still have and deserves her day in court, but I think it's pretty open and shut, considering that she intentionally filmed herself, intentionally identified herself while she was doing it, and identified herself as the perp. That action that she took makes me really, really upset. And some of that actually, how upset I am about this kind of bothers me, because my guess is making people like me, who love our country and respect our history, upset was probably part of her goal. So unfortunately, in that respect, she probably succeeded in the sense of, yes, this makes me angry. This should not be taking place. There is no excuse to deface in such an obscene manner a memorial honoring such a worthy and noble sacrifice. It's unacceptable, right? I think a lot of us would agree that that's not something that you should be doing. I think what a lot of us disagree on what the consequences should be. I could tell you my idea. I think she should serve 4 years in an active combat zone so that she can get a taste of what our boys went through in those 4 years in World War II. Frankly, I don't think there's an active combat zone, certainly not one that the United States is involved in, that can even compare with the horrors of what these men and some women had to face. But that's the closest that we can get, as far as I'm concerned. Ship her off to combat and make her understand what exactly it is that she's disrespecting. I hear that she can face up to 10 years in federal prison. That's great. That's not enough. Maybe make her serve her 10 years in prison after she serves 4 years on the front lines in combat. And she should probably spend those 10 years in jail listening to eyewitness accounts from World War II veterans and others who lived through it, so that she comes to understand not only what they went through over there, but why. She'll come out of that 14-year re-education situation a different person. I can promise you that. Now, am I actually advocating for that? I don't know. Maybe not. But that would certainly be justice. And it goes to show how far away the two sets of facts that we as Americans believe in are from each other. There's an American leftist set of facts, and there's a American set of facts. And they are not even close to each other in many respects. Obviously, only one set of facts can be accurate, but that doesn't mean that they are anything less than facts to the people that believe them. That is what we are dealing with in our country right now, and that is just a small example, even though it is an infuriating one. And it just goes to illustrate how important it is for you to look for the information yourself, to verify information yourself. So whether it's with AI or some other, I don't care what method you use, but constantly pushing yourself to make sure you are checking up on your facts so that you know your facts are actually accurate, are actually verified. Because there are so many people in our country that are 100% convinced in what they believe in and are 100% wrong. In fact, they have reality completely backwards, right? So we need to stop as a country assuming that our facts are correct. Work harder to verify your facts. The other big takeaway from this is how bad our education system really is. That someone can come away from decades of life experience believing that that is appropriate goes to show that we have done a stinky job in educating our populace, many times intentionally so. So if there's another recommendation that I can give you from that story, it's homeschool your kids. So let's get into our rapid fire segment today. I have a bunch of news bulletins, I guess you could say, that I need you to catch, because we're living in this world where anything that sounds positive about the second Trump administration is many times ignored or twisted. We know this about the American left. Even non-political people don't trust mainstream media, largely speaking, in our country. But what a lot of us still forget is that there are so many in the non-traditional media that you may think are kind of on the good side or on Trump's side that really aren't, and are certainly not accurate or trustworthy in what they choose to report and what they choose to say about it. So let's make sure you don't miss some of the things that have come out in recent days since our last episode that are important for you to wrap your head around. Just the news reported today, before we came on the air, Harmeet Dillon is saying that the DOJ is going to send 1,000 observers to help keep an eye out during the midterms. Now, these are not going to be people that are prosecuting election irregularities or addressing election boy, that's hard to say, election irregularities. These are observers, right? They're going to be the same thing as the party observers do at local levels. But their numbers are increased by 1,000. Good news for those of us concerned about election integrity. Also from Nick Sorter on X. Nick Sorter is a great follow on X. I recommend you get on X. I recommend you follow him at Nick Sorter. He was covering the news this week that Vance and RFK Jr., who RFK Jr. is on the health side of things, and Vice President Vance is on the fraud investigation side of things. They have teamed up on this, opened an investigation of up to 225 hospitals that they are referring to the Department of Justice for criminal investigation. Now, obviously, this is in the very early stages. We don't know what accountability will look like for these hospitals, but it is still a very good step in the right direction. Allegedly, these hospitals were using fake medical codes to bill insurance and to access taxpayer dollars for transgender stuff for minors. This goes directly against the Trump administration policy, and you can no longer use federal taxpayer dollars for these kind of procedures, right? It's up to $60+ million potentially that they had scammed insurance companies and taxpayer dollars into by mislabeling what the procedures are so that they hopefully won't be recognized as what they are, puberty blockers for minors. So now they are under criminal investigation for their sneaky attempts at continuing the woke agenda, even when it brutalizes our kids. Now, I recognize that this is alleged guilt at this point. I also recognize that a lot of us may not be very confident that convictions will follow. And, you might be right. The Trump administration cannot control what wacko judges do, nor can it control how much squishy attorney generals are allowed to do. Trump cannot appoint judges and attorney generals on his own. They have to be confirmed by the Senate, and they have to be, and some of them are elected positions, right? So you may be skeptical about serious consequences for these hospitals, and you may be right. But again, your answer there is not to blame Trump and vote for, Thomas Massie for president in 2028. Your answer there is to vote for better Republicans, right? Republicans who can get elected and who can make a difference up and down the ballot. But let's also not forget that the process is very much the punishment for a lot of these people. The Trump administration can do some things unilaterally, including some things that will force these hospitals to work through the political process, defending themselves, which is, as far as I'm concerned, some form of consequence, right? At least some form of accountability. It's exactly what the Democrats did to Donald Trump in the lawfare prior to and during the 2024 election. They weren't able to get convictions in many of those cases, but they were forcing him to defend himself. So good work from Vance and RFK Jr. that needs, of course, to be followed up by more good work. Also, on X, from Fox News via Eric Doherty on X, another good follow. Federal funding, as we've already talked about, is ceasing for puberty blockers, right? But it's also ceasing for cross-sex hormones and transition surgeries. This is a new round of policies and executive orders that the Trump administration is putting in place, what they can do unilaterally from the executive branch. That is going into effect October 13th of this year. These are things that I voted for, folks. And these are things that you voted for too. Crime continues to fall. Trump is beating his own numbers now from the very earliest days of Trump 2.0. From January to June of this year, 2026, compared to January to June of 2025. which was also Trump, the very beginning of Trump's term, violent crime during that time frame, compared to the same time frame in 2025, violent crime is down nationally 10.6%. Pretty good. Murder is down nationally 23%. Rape is down 18.6%. Robbery is down 19.6%. And aggravated assault is down 7.2%. Now, if you have a memory longer than a goldfish or a butterfly or something of that nature, you will remember that safety and law and order was one of the primary promises that Trump gave to us during his campaign. And it had broad appeal among the voting population in our country. And he is delivering on that promise at exceptional rates. This is almost unheard of. This is one of, if not the biggest drop in crime rates in American history, or at least modern American history. This is not political hyperbole, folks. These are facts that you can verify yourself. These are fewer victims, fewer crimes, less violence, and less death. If that is not a fundamental primary responsibility of a government, I don't know what is. Think about that murder rate, especially. Down 23% from Trump's numbers last year. That means that 1 out of 4 murders that otherwise would have happened is now not happening. A quarter. Almost a full quarter. 25% is pretty close to 23%, right? I mean, I'm not a math wizard, but to me, that sounds pretty good. You could say that is 1 out of 4 murders that otherwise would have happened have been prevented by the Trump administration, the Trump administration FBI, Trump administration law enforcement. Kinda a big deal. And so far, the Trump administration simply isn't getting the credit that they deserve for this. Another interesting bit of news from Eric Doherty on X. Mexico and the United States held a joint military exercise at the southern border to demonstrate and illustrate the joint mobilization between the two militaries against the Mexican drug cartels at the southern border. This is a particularly juicy one to me, that the U.S. military and the Mexican military is getting increasingly involved at the southern border, because I remember a big portion of Trump's voter bloc back in 2024, the anti-foreign interventionist group, that many of whom are so honked off with him today, that one of their large complaints about U.S. foreign policy prior to Trump during the 2024 election was that the military should not be so entangled overseas. It should be used to defend the homeland. And their argument was that the biggest threat to the homeland right now, the biggest cause of death in the homeland at that time, was the fentanyl crisis, which comes through the southern border via drug cartels and illegal immigration. Now, these people, a lot of whom are upset with Trump today, because of Iran. Okay, fine. You're allowed to have a foreign policy disagreement with the president. I may not share your disagreement. Some of it I may. Some of it I may not. But the point is that you are allowed to disagree with Trump's policy in Iran. But what you shouldn't be doing is ignoring the rest of what President Trump is doing, especially when it was one of the things that you asked for so much during the campaign. I saw it myself. I saw people talking about it on X, social media, that we needed the military involved at the southern border. And it's happening, right? And he is recruiting military assistance from Mexico. And Trump has bombed the drug cartels' boats out of the water. Remember the Venezuelan fishing boats? They weren't fishing boats. They were drug runners that Trump was using the military to sink. Remember that? And he designated these cartels as a terrorist group so that he could employ more military options against them. And he designated giant swaths of the southern border as national defense areas. Do you remember this happening? He militarized the southern border. That was back in 2025. Meaning stretches of the physical square footage, square mileage in this case, along the southern border were designated as military installation, essentially, military controlled area, allowing him to use the military to protect and enforce border laws, essentially, within those areas. That started back in 2025. It's a good thing because some of these drug cartels are basically militaries on their own. He has expanded that this week. He has expanded the area of the southern border that is under direct military control. And he has clarified the military personnel's ability and their legal grounds to pursue and capture people as they are trespassing onto these military zones, i.e., crossing the border illegally, right? So the military has a lot of freedom about what it can do with trespassers on military territory. So to make the southern border military territory gives the military a lot more freedom in how they can fight people who are crossing it and trying to smuggle drugs across it. So according to the DOD, that's the Department of War, he expanded the militarized section by almost 200 miles. That's up to 800 miles, or more than 40% of the southern border that the military now controls, and that he has given the military greater authorization to basically function as law enforcement against these terrorist organizations bringing poison and the wrong kind of people into our country. Now, pause there. If your thought when you heard that 40% plus of the southern border was under direct military protection now, if your thought was not, why only 40%, why not 100%, then I would submit to you that you have a problem. If your thought when you hear that military protection on the southern border has increased to 40% and their ability to protect our border within that 40% has increased, your first thought is, why not 100%? I'm going to suggest to you that you have been trained, that you have been mentally and emotionally manipulated by the American left and or the fake MAGA woke right. You have been trained and manipulated to always see things negatively about Trump. Let me say it again. He expanded our military authority and territory at the southern border to give you more of what you say you want. The military protecting American citizens from drug smuggling and drug smugglers at our national border. He is giving you more of what you want. And your first thought is what you're not getting. Or for some of your cases, your only thought is what you haven't gotten yet. You have a problem. That is just another form of TDS. But it's okay. Keep listening to the show, and I might be able to cure you from it. I got another one for you on Fox News. Via X from Eric Doherty's page, Energy Secretary Chris Wright has been highlighting policies which it appears we can reasonably expect, and as verified by artificial intelligence, by the way. Yes, I follow my own advice. Verified by Grok, by the way, these new policies in place, we can realistically expect domestic oil production to quadruple over the next 10 years, or something like it, and domestic production of natural gas to increase 7-fold over the next 10 years. because of policies put in place by the Trump administration. Now, I'm no economist, but I do know what happens when you increase supply, right? So obviously, how much supply of oil and natural gas there is not the only thing that's going to affect gas prices. Like I say, I'm not an economic expert, and I know that what happens overseas affects gas prices, particularly at the pump. But what I do know is that when you increase supply by numbers like that over a 10-year period, you have a very, very good chance of lowering prices. So I hope these little tidbits of information about what's going on, what the Trump administration is actually accomplishing, is able to bring your meter back a little bit from crazy and depressed, maybe a little bit back towards reality, right? I'm sure that you can point to things about the Trump administration that you are not 100% pleased with, maybe not pleased with at all. I can too. It's just silly to say that he is not accomplishing anything. That's what we are about here at this show, reality. Here's another bit of reality. There was a Christian missionary pilot by the name of Kevin Rideout who was rescued this week. And the Trump administration had a significant hand in it. By the way, this follows the release back last month, the July release of a Chinese pastor, Ezra Jin Mingri, I apologize about the pronunciation there, from the Zion Church, after Trump brought it up with Xi Jinping. The Chinese pastor was released. So on the heels of that is Mr. Rideout here, the missionary pilot, who was kidnapped by Islamic terrorists. Interesting. One Christian kidnapped by Islamic terrorists, the other imprisoned by the CCP. I find it ironic that both of the most destructive ideologies that we are fighting here at home, communism/socialism and Islamic extremism, are also being fought abroad. This is what Islam and this is what communism does, folks. It puts away people that do not approve of it or do not agree with it or it does not approve of, right? And remember, David Jenkins, who is a member of good standing and an elected national leader and national co-chair of the Democrat Socialists of America political party, recently said, quote, "Our goal is liberation. Our goal is communism." Communism and Islamofascism, as a lot of people are calling it, are the threat that we are facing at home and abroad. And they are the threat that President Trump is dealing with at home and abroad. Those two stories are particularly poignant for me because they are Christian pastors, Christian missionaries, right? And I see so much of Christians who are, dare I say it, ungrateful for what the Trump administration is doing. Now, I hesitate to accuse Christians of being unthankful because according to the book of Romans, unthankfulness is a very grave sin. But when I see the Trump administration doing so much that Christians should be rejoicing over, like rescuing persecuted brothers and sisters abroad, and I see so little reaction from so many Christians and so much negative reaction from so many other Christians, I'm sorry, but I don't know of any better way to describe Christian behavior surrounding Donald Trump other than being ungrateful. Now, being ungrateful to another person is not really, I don't know if I would necessarily consider that a sin, probably self-centered. What I'm telling you is that so many of us as Christians are ungrateful to God for the way that he has used the Trump administration to send us blessings as believers. I know there are Christians out there. I haven't met many of them, if any of them, in person, but I've heard them speak online who kind of deify or sanctify, like make a saint out of President Trump. He's not Michael the Archangel, and Far from it. And I don't think he appears in prophecy either. In his personal life has many things, particularly in his past, that I would disagree with. But his service as president has been a tremendous blessing from God to the country in so many ways. Yes, there are Christians who are way too excited about him. So let's put it that way. But to me, it's split by thirds. 1/3 of us are a little bit too excited about him. 1/3 of us are ignoring him. And 1/3 of us are criticizing him. And we should not be ignoring him or criticizing him. We should be thankful to God for what he has done, which is good. Because what he has done, which is good, continues to grow in numbers. And it is significant, especially when contrasted with what the Democrats do. Consider how the United States used to give foreign aid through USAID, much of which was flushed down the toilet with fraud and misuse, never reached its intended destination, and much of which was used for stuff that is explicitly anti-Christian, like gay Sesame Street programming in Pakistan or whatever it was. You might have to fact check that one. I forget the details on that one, but it was something like that. Not only has Trump, by dragging the rhinos in the Republican Party kicking and screaming, essentially shut down federal funding to the USAID slush fund, but he is replacing it with federal funding to 3 evangelical Christian foreign aid and humanitarian groups. Private evangelical Christian humanitarian aid organizations. $2 billion in, quote, partnership and funding for faith-based and community organizations focused on global health and humanitarian assistance, unquote. These 3 organizations are World Vision, which I wasn't familiar with, but I looked into. It is an evangelical Christian private organization. Compassion International, which I was a little bit familiar with. Again, an evangelical, private, humanitarian, and evangelistic organization. And Samaritan's Purse, which I am very familiar with, which is a very evangelistic and a very effective humanitarian, private Christian organization. That is what Trump's government is doing to answer America's need for or desire to send humanitarian aid worldwide. And he is replacing a godless fraud money laundering scheme. And instead, he's giving money to World Vision, Compassion International, and Samaritan's Purse. Taxpayer money going to Christian, evangelistic, and evangelical private Christian organizations because they do the work so much better than USAID ever did. Contrast that and everything else that you've heard about today with what the Democrats did in Massachusetts recently. A statewide abortion law allowing abortion up to birth, passed by the Democrat-controlled House and Senate in Massachusetts without a single Republican vote, and signed by a Democrat governor. That is what you have nationally if the Democrats get their way. Sorry, folks, but there is no reason to say that nothing is happening. Nothing good has come from the Trump administration, especially if you are a Christian. So, open your eyes, verify your sources, keep listening to this show, and I will keep you a little bit more balanced. I will keep you a little bit closer to what the reality is by simply pointing out to you verifiable facts which you can check on and document yourself. Thank you for tuning in today. Please like, subscribe, and share this episode with someone who you think would appreciate it. Next week, the Caleb Landis Show will not be on Tuesday. It'll be later in the week, probably the weekend, a shortened special episode from the Crawford County Fair, hoping to have some special guests with us that day. And keep an eye out for the upcoming expansion to the Caleb Landis Show universe, which I have teased twice now. So, thank you for tuning in, and we will see you later than usual next week.